Hello, I'm David Owen Norris. I've been thinking about how Beethoven played the piano. He had lessons at the organ and the harpsichord. Indeed, he was the official court performer on both instruments at Bonn. But at the newfangled piano, he was left to find his own way. A musician who heard him improvise said, "It seems that it's by a path of his own discovery that he has attained that height of excellence whereon he now stands. A self-taught pianist." But at first, his friends admitted, his playing was rough and hard. It's always interesting to ask people about those unforgettable experiences that shaped their lives. And if we could ask Beethoven, I'm sure he'd remember an occasion just before his 21st birthday, when he heard a really good pianist for the very first time. In 1791, he was travelling with his employer, the Elector of Cologne, and in Aschaffenburg they heard the great pianist Sterkel, who played with immense grace. Beethoven stood near him as he played, watching and listening intently, and then he sat down and played his latest composition, a set of variations, improvising new variations in the elegant style he had just heard for the first time, turning himself into a great pianist by a single effort of will. Very Beethoven. Those 24 variations on Regini's Arietta Veni Amore show how the lonely path that he discovered so early led Beethoven to personal quirks of style that he was still exploring at the end of his life. It's a simple enough tune. Some of the variations lurch from soft to loud and then back again, almost randomly. And in this one, Beethoven's practically thumbing his nose. Thing became Beethoven's stock in trade in the piano sonatas. Or the prolonged trills in the late piano sonatas have their origin in 1791. Do the melting horn chords of Opus 81A. Which begin and Beethoven squeezes in a homage to the composer he most admired, Handel. "He is the master of us all," said Beethoven. Beethoven's triple-time adagios are notoriously difficult to navigate. You're never sure which bit of the bar you're in. In the Regini variations, Beethoven actually puts rests just at the moment that you might hope he made the meter clear. A surprise? famous for jumping to different keys. He does that in the finale. To 3, and now to B flat. When you think it's all over, a brilliantly witty written out ritardando. These mercurial characteristics, which persisted throughout his life, surprises of dynamic, surprises of key and metre, irreverent mockery, parodies of other composers, they're the sort of thing that all improvisers do for fun. Beethoven's unique self-taught piano style had its origin in improvisation, as you might expect if you think about it. Beethoven's brilliant playfulness, which never detracted from his fundamental seriousness, always impressed those who heard him improvise. And Beethoven would improvise at the drop of a hat, even on a piece that was already finished and published, as he did in Aschaffenburg. So my recital will be an experiment where I shall play the Moonlight Sonata and the Pathétique Sonata with the same musical freedom that Beethoven himself might have enjoyed. It's an experiment with 3 elements to it. First of all, there's the vivid improvisatory style we've just been tracing. Then, if there's one word which applies to 18th century music, it's ornamentation. Beethoven lived more than half his life in the 18th century. So if I feel the urge to decorate a melody, I shall. Then, thirdly, there's the evidence in the scores themselves. For instance, in the Pathétique Sonata, the first time we hear this, these notes are marked RF, Rundfortsando. But a moment later they're repeated, and this time they're marked SF, Sforzando. The 2 marks must mean something different. It was as long ago as 1963 that the great musicologist Christa Landon wrote, "The many meanings of sforzato include not only a sharp rhythmic accent, but also an expressive hesitation or a soft attack. In fast movements, just as much as in slow ones, SF may indicate rubato." Rubato, of course, means an escape from the tyranny of the regular beat of a metronome. Nearly 60 years later, that rubato interpretation of SF has still not entered the general musical lexicon, but I'm convinced that Christa Landon was right. Or take the sign that's sometimes called a double hairpin, where a get louder sign is followed by a get quieter sign. Beethoven used this so often that he fused the 2 signs together so that they look like a diamond, And in the Moonlight Sonata, he wrote this diamond under groups of 3 notes in this theme. Here, and here, and so on. But just think about the nature of the piano for a minute. I can't actually get louder and softer. All I can do is play the middle note louder than the other 2. But I'd do that anyway. It's on the beat. And if Beethoven wanted to make absolutely certain, he could have written an accent. Now, there's more to this double hairpin than that. And again, I'm convinced that it's something to do with rubato. Pianists have been interested in bending the time from the very beginning. Daniel Turk, who wrote one of the very first piano tutors, invented signs, lines and boxes to show when to speed up or slow down when the word ritardando would have been just too definite. Franz Liszt did the same, twice. Some of his early piano music uses lines, a little bit like Turk's, and then in the 1850s, for his orchestral music, Liszt invented a simpler system, where a big letter A means something less than accelerando, a sort of crescendo and diminuendo of the rhythm, said Liszt. And there's Wagner's law. Wagner, Liszt's son-in-law, was first known as a conductor of Beethoven, and he said that no one knew how to perform Beethoven's symphonies till they'd heard Liszt play them at the piano. And if you look at Liszt's Beethoven transcriptions, the first thing you'll notice is that he's added lots of hairpins and double hairpins. Rubato, always rubato. Wagner's law is when you reach a tune, slow down. So you won't be expecting me to play in strict tempo. Carl Czerny left notes of his piano lessons with Beethoven. Remarkably accelerando and crescendo, he wrote, of a passage in the Moonlight Sonata where neither the manuscript nor the first edition even hints at any such thing. In the days before recording, it was easier to realise that there's more than one way of playing everything. It could be different each time. I'm interested in the staccatos in the cross hands theme in the first movement of the Pathétique as they're presented in the first edition. The manuscript is lost. At first sight, they seem very inconsistent, so much so that no subsequent edition preserves them. But as I look at these staccato marks, I think I detect a delightfully disordered beguilement by Beethoven, the master performer, as he puts his idea into different lights and looks at it from different angles, sometimes stressing the sevenths, now dwelling on the fact of minor, and all encoded in those inconsistent staccatos. This is a Broadwood grand piano, very like the one that was presented to Beethoven, and so is the instrument I shall play the recital on in the Turner Simms Concert Hall. They're tuned to Young's temperament, which was devised at just about the time that these sonatas were written. Briefly, pianos have to face the fact that one and the same key has to do duty for both G-sharp and A-flat. And there are various ways of getting round that. The way we use at the moment, equal temperament, means that every tonality, C-sharp minor, A-flat major, G major, every tonality is equally out of tune. Our subtler forefathers preferred methods of tuning where every tonality was acceptable, but they all sounded different. Some were particularly bright, others dark and lugubrious. And Young's temperament is the Rolls-Royce of those unequal methods of tuning. To be honest, with instruments 200 years old, I'm often more worried about whether the unisons are staying in tune than the colour of the thirds. And these actions are very ancient. But I hope you'll cut the piano some slack. I like to think of the occasion when the great opera composer Verdi was taken to hear Paris's red-hot orchestra, and afterwards his hosts crowded round him, hoping for a word of praise. "Well," said Verdi, "the performance was so slick that it completely distracted me from the actual music." In his wonderful play about Beethoven, The Listening Heart, David Constantine writes a scene where Beethoven gives a piano lesson. And Beethoven says, "Listen the music out. Listen it forth."
Thank you.